we've all been in situations where strategies have been published to great fanfare and, great excitement and stuff, and then the strategy actually just gathers dust on a shelf. And we were determined as an industry that instead this strategy should be dynamic and should be living and should be vibrant. And we committed to doing 6-month reviews, and obviously this is the first of it. The context, I suppose, is that we've got a budget in 2 weeks' time. Right there. Yeah, we have a budget in 2 weeks' time, as everybody knows and everybody's written about ad nauseum, and I'm sure there'll be a lot more articles between now and then. The budget obviously is very relevant for tourism, and a lot in the strategy is if you like, predicated on good government policies and pro-tourism policies. And in that regard, I'm just going to take you through where we are at the moment in terms of a progress update, and I'll be fairly brief. And there's 51 recommendations in the strategy, and you'll be pleased to hear I'm not going to go through each of the 51 because I think we'd all lose the will to live to a certain extent, so I won't do that to you. But what I would like to do is highlight some of the key issues that we think need to be addressed. You all know it's a strategy devised for the industry, by the industry, and of the industry. This is where we are at the moment. 2017 is obviously the last full year, if you like, of tourism numbers. And remember, we talk about tourism as being an export industry. So these are overseas earnings. So 4.9 billion euro was spent by overseas visitors into the country last year. We think that if the right policies and the right pro-tourism initiatives are taken, that can grow by 65% to 8.1 billion euro by 2025. That can lead to 80,000 more jobs. There'll be an increase in visitor numbers of just over 50%. And crucially, and I think it's something that we're keen to stress and kind of convey at every opportunity, tourism is an economic engine for growth, both for the country and also for the regions. So crucially, 23 cents of every euro spent by an overseas tourist goes back into the economy in direct tourism-related taxes. So if overseas visitor revenue grows to something like 8 billion euro, there will be a corresponding increase just shy of 2 billion euro per annum into the exchequer in terms of direct tax revenue from the tourism sector. There were a number of enabling factors. You've got copies of the strategy, or they're sitting behind you anyway. If you recall, there were a number of enabling factors that we highlighted in the strategy that need to happen in order for allow us to hit the numbers as you see there in terms of 2025 targets. So I'll just run through the enabling factors, and then, as Mara's mentioned, there's 51 recommendations within the strategy, and I'll take you through some of the kind of more pertinent or relevant ones at the moment. So in terms of the enabling factors, we said that 11,000 more hotel bedrooms need to be developed and open and trading by 2025 if we're to add the capacity in order to reach the numbers in terms of growth that we're talking about. The good news is, according to CBRE, there's 1,468, just shy of 1,500 bedrooms opening in 2018, and there's a further 6,000 on site where bricks are actually being laid. And most new builds are in Dublin, as you'd expect, but there's also activity in Cork and Galway. We've developed a sort of a gauge system. I'm not sure if petrol gauge is the right term, or hybrid, or oxygen gauge, or I'm not sure what gauge it is. But effectively, like any gauge, there's green for success, orange for sort of work in progress, and red for what we think is in retreat or no action has been taken in that regard. So on the hotel bedrooms, we've gone with the green gauge. In terms of the second enabling factor, which was the retention of the competitive tourism tax rate of 9%, that's obviously under intense pressure at the moment. There's a lot of discussion and talk about that. We've put that at an orange. We think it's a key enabling factor if we want tourism to continue to grow and jobs to continue to be created throughout the sector. It's the right tourism VAT rate for the country. It's been good for the exchequer, good for regions, good for jobs, and good for the sector, and it should be maintained. Any increase in it is likely to damage demand, and at a time like this, with Brexit impending, that would be very, very detrimental to the industry. The third enabling factor that we put into the strategy was that good to very good value for money ratings needed to be over 60%. These are ratings that are conducted on an annual basis by Fortune Ireland in terms of exit surveys as tourists leave the country. According to the most recent surveys, this rating is at 52%, so that's a fall of 6%. So it's an orange at the moment. We've got to, if you like, improve our game in that regard, because staying competitive and ensuring the value for money is on offer to the consumer is more important than ever. There's a lot of reasons in there, of course. Business costs have risen, sterling has weakened, making it more expensive for the British consumer here. So there's kind of a lot of reasons for that, but as a sort of on a macro level, we, the industry, and the economy as a whole, needs to make sure that we continue to offer good value for money wherever possible. The fourth one here on this slide is that we advocate that the government needs to invest 60 million per annum in terms of capital investment, in terms of new products of scale and appeal throughout the country. So that's capital investment rather than current investment. The National Development Plan, as you all know, came out earlier this year. It only allocated 30 million per annum to the tourism sector. We think that's far shy of what it needs to be. And if we're talking about building new things of scale and international appeal around the country in strategic points, that envelope of money needs to be increased. And remember, there's 250,000 people at the moment work in this sector, and it's important that we continue to create new things and new experiences. There's 4 more enabling factors. We argued that access into Ireland needs to increase by 40% by 2025. That's air and sea access, predominantly air access. The good news there is, and we've put a green gauge on this, the good news there is that summer air access has continued to grow. It's up 6%, and for the winter season to come, it's estimated to grow by 10%. So lots of great stuff like the new flights from China, Aer Lingus continue to expand into the States. Ryanair particularly active on the German routes. They're all very, very positive for an island like Ireland that depends on air and sea access. Sea access not so positive this particular summer. There's been a lot of operational issues with the likes of the WB8s and so on. But long term, we see very positive growth trends in terms of air and sea access, so we've given that a green gauge at the moment. In terms of current money, and this is part of our pre-budget submission, is that we're arguing that the government needs to restore cuts in tourism budgets, and they really need to be increased by €50 million per annum to allow for increased overseas marketing, provide a Brexit market diversification fund, and increase agency operational budgets. And obviously we await budget 2019 for that. That's in an orange. It's worth stating that the €114 million is what is spent currently by the government on current tourism budgets. €114 million. It's very little when looking at the importance and the size of the sector, and the importance in particular to the region. So we're arguing that €50 million is needed now more than ever if we're to continue to grow and continue to prosper into the future. The 7th enabling factor was that we as an industry have to make sure that we match or exceed the holiday expectations of the tourists when they come here. And the good news is there that latest Vulture Ireland survey actually identified that 99% of respondents state that the holiday matched or exceeded expectations, which is very comforting, if you like, to know that the industry is providing a really good product, and that's obviously a green gauge. And the last sort of enabling factor that we highlighted in the strategy, and in terms of our 6th progress update, is the importance of Dublin Airport. And it's not in any way to say that the regional airports or Cork and Shannon or Knock or Kerry are not important. They are particularly important to the regions, but Dublin is and will always be the main gateway into the country. And it's not just for tourism, it's for trade. And there's capacity issues at Dublin Airport. As we all know, it's going to have 30 million passengers this year, and there's issues in terms of congestion, both in terms of airside and landside. The good news is there that the DAA are making significant progress. They've announced that €900 million will be spent on both the new runway and on increasing gates and piers by 30%, which is really, really encouraging. There is an issue with the second runway insofar as construction is underway, but there are planning restrictions, as most of you know, on the number of flights that can depart and land on that second runway, and those planning restrictions really need to be lifted if we're going to maximise that second runway. We have that as an orange at the moment, because if the planning restrictions are lifted and progress continue on that second runway, that should really become a green in 6 months' time when we revisit this. There's 10 pillar themes in the strategy, so it's the A to Z of Irish tourism. I don't know whether many of you have read the whole strategy. I don't blame you if you haven't. There's an executive summary to it, but we tried to be as forensic and as detailed and as thorough as possible. So it's everything from competitiveness to access to capacity to labour skills, to marketing, regionality and seasonality, and there's obviously recommendations with each. So in total there's 51 recommendations, as Mara said at the outset. Where we are at the moment in terms of this first 6-month review of an 8-year plan is that 6 of the recommendations, to our mind, have progressed and have been completed satisfactorily. 32 are what we call work in progress, so attention is needed on those to ensure that the recommendation goes forward rather than slips back. And 13, to our mind, of the recommendations have yet to commence and need to be addressed. And I don't think 6 months into an 8-year roadmap, that is, you nearly expect that the vast majority of the recommendations are work in progress. And what we hope to do is every 6 months to revisit this and see how are those progressing. So has the green gone up? Has the orange stayed the same? Has the red gone up or down? All those sort of things will be particularly relevant and a key metric for the sector as a whole. Each of the themes has 5 or 6 recommendations in it, in total 51 recommendations. I'm not going to take you through all of them now, but I thought I'd pick out some of the relevant or some of the pertinent ones. So in the first theme, which is that of competitiveness, there's a lot there, as you can see. One of the ones I'd just like to point out is the second one, and I should say that there's a little booklet that most of you have, which includes a printed version of this. So by all means, scribble away, but it's online. It'll be on our website, and you also have a printed version with you. But the second recommendation there is all about the importance of competitiveness. And according to the National Competitiveness Council, actually Ireland's competitive position is weakening as business costs are rising, and that's obviously a cause of concern. Thus the red gauge. Again, I'm not flying through these other than just for the purposes of time. We have a Q&A afterwards, we can talk about them. There's a lot in the access issue, which is all about aviation and sea access. There's an awful lot there. That top one is so important, both for the economy, for trade, for tourism, particularly in a Brexit context. That idea of Dublin Airport improving and enhancing its terminal facilities and developing the second runway. And as discussed, that's an orange gauge at the moment. If the planning restrictions are lifted on the second runway, that will be particularly encouraging. The second one there is the importance of continuing the abolition of the airport departure tax. And there's plenty of stuff in there as well. You can see this one here, a liberalised access regime being secured as part of any new EU-UK deal. It's so utterly critical. When the UK leaves the EU, as it's set to do March 29th, the UK obviously leaves the Open Skies Agreement. And I think it was front page of your paper, Mark, yesterday. That has massive consequences for transport and tourism, because literally a UK airline will not have the right or the license to fly into an EU airport such as Dublin. Likewise, an EU airline such as Aer Lingus will not have the right to fly into a UK airline. And there's no WTO rules to fall back on, unlike a lot of other sectors. Aviation is very different. So an alternative to the Open Skies Agreement needs to be put in place before March 29th next year, or otherwise we're going to have a serious issue. And a lot of the industry and the aviation industry, Michael Leary in particular, have been very vocal on this. And it's disappointing in many ways that there's not more focus on this in the EU-UK discussions at the moment. The third theme is that of increasing capacity. Again, I'm not going to labour it too much. It's all in the documents in front of you. One of the areas, just to point out, and we mentioned it before, is this need for what we call capital investment in the tourism sector. It's well shy of where it should be at the moment, and that's going to be a handbrake on growth. Exchequer capital investment. This top one here is worth pointing out. We need a published spatial plan outlining how exchequer investment will be spent in new tourism products of scale and international appeal around the country. We don't have that at the moment. So I mentioned earlier that €300 million had been allocated to the tourism budget for capital investment. We don't have clear line of sight as to how that €300 million will be spent, or what it will be spent on over the next 10 years. That's, I suppose, a task for Fáilte Ireland, who disperse the money. And in Q4 this year, so by the end of the year, Fáilte Ireland are expected to publish a development plan for Irish tourism. So we've put that as an orange gauge because we expect far greater insights into how the capital envelope for tourism will be allocated over the next 10 years. And we're very much of the view that the fewer, bigger, better approach should be taken. We should be investing in products of scale and iconic, if you like, experiences, rather than spreading the jam too thinly. Brexit, we all know the Brexit issue is inside out at this stage, and I suppose the one thing that we can all say is that we don't really know the outcome, but there's a lot of concern here for the tourism sector. And particularly in the context of the upcoming budget, now is not the time to undermine the sector with so much Brexit uncertainty. 39% of all international visitors to Ireland come from Britain. It's our biggest single source market. It's absolutely critical. It's got the best seasonal spread, it's got the best regional spread, and it's so important. And there's a number of things here in the Brexit chapter that we'd be concerned about. The preservation of the common travel area and a soft border on the island of Ireland. You know, we thought it was a given with the backstop agreement, but there seems to be a lot of rowing back from that, which is a major concern of us, for us. Anything that restricts the free movement of people across the island is anathema to tourism and will be very damaging to the sector. The aviation issue I mentioned, and also let's not forget sea access. The idea of customs checks at seaports would be massively damaging to tourism. And particularly ferry passengers who have to come in and out of the ports. And that last one I think is worth highlighting, that there's no resourced Brexit action plan for the tourism sector from the government, which is very, very frustrating for us. So a lot of other sectors, whether it's agri-food or other export industries, have actually got increased funding and increased resources to allow them to mitigate against the negative aspects that Brexit will deliver. And tourism has got nothing to date. There's been no budget increases. So one of the things that we are really arguing about is that it has to be a Brexit mitigation fund for tourism in the upcoming budget. ITIC did a recent study on the cost, if you like, of a hard Brexit of Irish tourism, and we've quantified it quite conservatively, to our mind, as being €260 million in the immediate aftermath, growing to about €500 million. So that's the cost of flight disruption, GB visitor numbers declining, the dangers of a regulatory misalignment between the north and the south. There's an awful lot there that causes concern, and it really needs to be addressed by a beefed up Brexit resourced action plan for tourism. In terms of state support for tourism, there's kind of a lot here, and again, it's all in the documents in front of you. I suppose one of the ones there that you know a lot of people were interested in at the launch of the strategy was when we called for a review of Fáilte Ireland to ensure a sharper definition of role and responsibilities with appropriate levels of funding and resources. That's work in progress. That's the orange gauge, as you can see there. The department is publishing what they call a tourism action plan for the next 2 years. It's due to come out quite shortly, and in that we hope that there will be an assessment of Fáilte Ireland carried out by the department, specifically in the areas of product development, labour skills and training, and research, which are the areas that ITIC pointed out in the strategy Fáilte needed to improve their output on. So we expect in the tourism action plan that there will be an action around that, which will be particularly important to us, to make sure that Fáilte Ireland are appropriately resourced and appropriately funded to respond to the needs of the industry. Regional and seasonal spread, and I'm coming to the end here, you'll be pleased to hear, there's a lot in here again. Just I suppose that top one, we called for the development of a greenway strategy. The good news is, and that's why it's a green gauge, the good news is that the greenway strategy was launched earlier this year, or back in June I think. €53 million being committed over the next 3 years, and there's a commitment to one coast-to-coast greenway, which is very, very encouraging. And it's the type of iconic tourism experience that will appeal to the international market. And another, just to highlight here, and again it's green, and it's one of the actions that Fáilte Ireland have implemented very successfully, is the launch of the brand for the Midlands and Shannon Corridor, Ireland's hidden heartlands. It was launched in March or April. And it's been very well received by the industry, and there's lots of domestic marketing on it at the moment, which is encouraging, and as I understand it, there will be international marketing of that region in the next year. In terms of the marketing, I suppose the one thing that the overseas market, the one thing we do want to highlight is that there is not enough money committed to overseas marketing budgets by the state. So the industry spends a fortune every year, just shy of €100 million every year, so that's the airlines, the hotels, the attractions, the tour operators, spends a lot of money marketing Ireland overseas to encourage people to come here and use their product or service. But equally, Tourism Ireland have to have additional budgets so that Brand Ireland, they're the custodians, if you like, of Brand Ireland, and they need to be able to, if you like, commit more investment to media in key markets. So, for example, we've called for €25 million in increased overseas marketing budgets, and hopefully that will materialise in the upcoming budget. The example I always use is the States. So Tourism Ireland have a budget of about €9 million for the States. There's 25 gateways now from North America with direct flights into Ireland. So that €9 million does not go very far when you're covering that many gateways 12 months a year across all the media channels. And we're going to lose opportunities, and some of those new routes will be unsustainable, if you like, because there won't be awareness of Ireland as a holiday experience and as a destination. The penultimate theme is that of the importance of the labour force for tourism, and tourism, like no other, is struggling at the moment to fill vacancies. It should be said that just shy of 80,000 jobs have been created in the tourism and hospitality sector over the last 7 years, and that's something I think we should be very proud of. About 68% of those jobs are outside of Dublin, so we're a massive regional employer, and we're the biggest indigenous sector by some distance for the country. But there's a lot of issues here in terms of labour force. There is an issue. We feel that there's no, if you like, single accountable state agency that should be responsible for managing and coordinating tourism education, training and skills gaps. We think that should be Fáilte Ireland. There's a statutory responsibility, we think, of within the legislation for Fáilte to do that. And we argue that a director of function should be appointed at the agency to reflect the importance of that sector. And of course, Fáilte Ireland's new tourism development plan is due to come out Q4, and we hope that the agency is able to articulate how it looks at this element of tourism within that plan. And the final one, you'll be pleased to hear, is this whole balanced portfolio, making sure that we market diversify. And there's we put in the strategy that the emphasis and focus for accelerated growth really should be North America and mainland Europe. So there's a lot of excitement, justifiably so, about new long-haul markets such as the Chinas of this world. But really, the long-term accelerated growth is going to come from the mature markets where we still have very little market share. So North America and mainland Europe is where we see the growth, and there's significant growth to date in those markets, so we've given that a green gauge. Also within the market diversification is this strategic review of the British market, which is long overdue, and I'm pleased to say that it's close to completion now. Tourism Ireland has set up a review of that market. It's been meeting for the last 6 months or so, and there should be something by the end of the year. So that's a whistle-stop tour. There's a lot in there, and obviously a lot of stuff that we didn't talk about, but that's what the Q&A session is about. If you want to kind of state of the nation, sort of where we're at in terms of the strategy, 13 have yet to progress in our view. 32 are work in progress, so they can either go forward or go backwards by their very nature, so it's important that we keep an eye on those. And 6, if you like, have been completed, which are some of the ones I highlighted. We do intend to come back and do this sort of exercise every 6 months. And I think what will be interesting will be, how that page there changes in terms of which are progressing quicker than others, which are going backwards. But I do think there's an onus, if you like, on the tourism sector as a whole, which is the industry, the agencies, the government, to make sure we're pulling in the one direction. So in terms of the government introducing pro-tourism enabling policies, the agency need to row in behind that and support it, and that will allow the industry to deliver the growth that we've enjoyed over the last few years. And remember, that's growth for both the sector, if you like, in terms of the 20,000 tourism businesses that are in the sector, but crucially, the 1 in 10 people that are employed in tourism and hospitality around the country. There's a lot of jobs and livelihoods that depend on a healthy tourism sector. And just because we've had growth in recent times is not to say that we should take things for granted now, and we should, assume that everything will go, merrily along its way. There needs to be a focus and a commitment to tourism collectively, if we're to hit the growth target that we all hope. So that's it.